Welcome to EPIC's 2025, the Electoral Platform and Information Integrity Summit of the Global South. It's a long name, but it has a lot of meaning. And welcome to Sri Lanka.
Thank you.
For the viewers who may not know you, would you please introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what do you do?
Yeah, my name is Usama Khilji. I come from Pakistan. I'm co-founder and director of Bolo, which is a digital rights organization based in Pakistan. I mean, we work around South Asia. And I'm also the vice chair of the Global Network Initiative, where it's a multi-stakeholder forum where we hold technology companies accountable.
Okay. Uh, if you can repeat about the GNI, the Global
Network Initiative. Yeah.
How global is it? I mean, what are we talking about
We
here?
have members from across all continents, and we have membership from technology companies, and we have an entire accountability mechanism on holding tech companies accountable where their assessment of their human rights policies related to freedom of expression and privacy rights take place every 2 years. And what's unique is that we have the companies voluntarily join the network, become members, and then the non-company members, which is civil society, academics, and investors, they then carry out the assessment process, where they ask questions of the companies, and it includes 8 case studies every 2 years from across the world. So we have civil society members from almost, any country you name will have 1 or 2 members. Not all, but from across Latin America, across Asia, across Africa, Europe, North America, and even Australia.
Very good.
So the membership is quite vast, and that's really why I really truly believe in that that mechanism, because it's the only one where the companies are voluntarily saying we're going to open ourselves up to accountability.
It reminds me of, maybe you know, B Corp certification, where a company can get certified saying we're B Corp certified, and that gives the people some trust. of
Exactly.
That this is a company that I can trust. Is
Yeah.
this what you're trying to do with GNI or the Global Network Initiative?
In some ways, so a lot of the company policies refer to the GNI principles. So the GNI principles include transparency, they include freedom of expression, they include privacy, and a lot of different aspects under these 3 different principles. And what it also does is it enables the companies to tell governments that, hey, we cannot answer this request, or we cannot conform to this request because we are bounded by the GNI principles, which are rooted in international human rights law, including the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So it gives an international law aspect to it, which of course all governments also have to abide by. But in a lot of cases, we see governments violating those commitments.
And so you are the bridge, but you're also the neutral ground in which a private company may come and even speak to the government indirectly or directly and tell, like the example that you just said, which is I cannot adhere to your request
Exactly.
because of the GNI is not preventing me, but
It's guiding me.
it's guiding me. Excellent. We'll come back to GNI. Please, Bolo B. Bolo B, if I'm not mistaken, Bolo means speak. B,
Exactly. Speak up.
speak up, Bolo
Exactly.
B. What is Bolo B?
Yeah, so it's an organization we founded around 13 years back now. And what we essentially do is we campaign on digital rights in Pakistan. So we do research work, we do advocacy work, and we do policy work as well. And it's largely around making sure that the laws are human rights friendly, that there's more transparency, and that the people know what their rights are, and people are not afraid to speak up. So we push back against censorship, we push back against surveillance, and we work with the parliament, the judiciary, and the government to sort of guide them that this is how the law should be. This law is bad. Please take it back. And of course, they don't listen to us, but we keep trying.
And are you also Well, it sounds to me that Bolo B believes in education.
So we do a lot of training work, that's true. So we do digital security and safety trainings. We do them for children. We do them for journalists. We do them for judges. We do them for human rights defenders. So across the spectrum. And we even sometimes do open to public digital security
Wow.
trainings. But a lot of our educational work happens through the media. So through TV, through newspapers, through radio, we engage with, and of course social media. So we engage with all these mediums, media of communication to reach public and to really, have a conversation with them about what their rights are, how they can be safeguarded, and how they can exercise them.
You are, to an extent, in that sense, a union for the people.
Well, we wish we were that large. We're a very small team. A union sounds good. But really, we work with other civil society partners in Pakistan. So our approach is very collaborative. We work with universities, we work with other civil society organizations, and even state institutions, and media organizations, very importantly. Because I believe without the media, you don't really reach people. Yeah, that's how we sort of reach people. But a lot of our advocacy, you're right, is sort of, so to speak, unionized, where we will get together with other civil society groups, digital rights groups, we'll get together with media groups and lawyers groups, and we'll come out with a joint statement rather than doing standalone things, because I think working in unity and unison is always more effective than working on your own.
Definitely, definitely. It's much more stronger when you collaborate with other brands, not individuals, but
Other groups.
Other groups,
Yeah.
right? The tribe mentality, to an extent. Just before we jump to my next question, I believe there's a lot of people who would like to do something like Bolo B, which is speak up, and maybe they would also like to speak up. Maybe they have an idea that they want to integrate into the society, or they want to execute. How does Bolo B stay alive? Are you a non-profit?
We are a non-profit, but interestingly, we're a non-funded entity. So we used to be a funded organization, but because running an NGO is becoming increasingly difficult in the region, there's so many regulations, there's so many obstructions, and what we realized was that if we continued as a funded, a fully functional organization, most of our energies were spent in admin work,
Yes.
in reporting, in audits,
Uh-huh.
in registration, and then we just lose focus on what we're supposed to do. So then what we started doing was we closed down our bank account and we started working as a non-funded entity. It's been around 5 years now, where we do individual consulting work in this sector, but really we rely on partnerships. So we'll partner with one civil society organization to host an event. We'll partner with a university to do some research. We'll partner with a media organization to run an awareness campaign, right? So I think in that model, we're a lot more effective. But really, starting out, getting together, getting like-minded people together, and then getting the word out is our model. And that's really what we rely on.
That's good. I mean, that gives hope to people who do not have the capital per se.
Exactly. It's very difficult to gain that now.
Difficult. And it's very difficult to raise funds for an
Exactly.
NGO.
Exactly.
Because, and I understand the investors to an extent, I mean, they also would like profits. There's actually a very small percentage of people willing to invest in an NGO with no expected return.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
very difficult.
But having said that, there's a lot of funding opportunities, right? There's foundations, there are other organizations, there are consortiums that want to fund initiatives. So we even work with the UN. Right now I'm working on a research with UNDP. We've worked with the UN Women before. So there's a lot of opportunities to earn money for your labor. Without starting an NGO. But even if you want to start an NGO, there are still a lot of opportunities. It's just that we chose not to do that at this point.
That's good to hear. I think that gives hope to the people. Let's speak about Pakistan. I mean, where you come from, your motherland. What is the current state of information integrity in Pakistan?
It's tricky.
I
There's a
know.
lot of censorship. The media self-censors a lot because of threats that they get from state and non-state actors. Social media is obviously relatively freer, but there have been very draconian legislations that have been put in place in order to get social media users to toe the line of the state, to not criticize the state too much. And that's a big problem because we have a lot of cases on journalists, on social media users, on activists, you name it, and people are in trouble for simply speaking their mind. So I think the criminalization of speech is a huge issue. And just this year, Pakistan amended the cybercrime law, whereby sharing false information is a punishable crime with 3 years in jail and 2 million rupee fine. So that really shows you how deep the state is trying to control what happens on social media. But the good thing is that there's always pushback. So there's a lot of pushback from different lawyers, from media, from civil society, and we're hoping that the government will, think with more sense and amend the law, more ideally repeal at least the amendment that they passed this year, because it's detrimental to progress, and it's also detrimental to the fundamental rights of Pakistani citizens that are guaranteed in the constitution, guided by international human rights law.
So the state amended this cyber crime.
The government, yes.
Yes, right. The state, the government. Sorry. Now, would you rather they do nothing?
No, I think I would rather they use the constitution as their guide, which they don't seem to be doing when they're making laws. So a lot of the laws really are violating Pakistan's commitments under international human rights law. So, for example, Article 19 of the ICCPR, which is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, tells you that you can put restrictions on speech, but they have to be legal, they have to be necessary, and they have to be proportionate. But what we're seeing is that a lot of the laws that are being put in place have very disproportionate punishments for just speech, right? So sharing false information is punishable by 3 years. How is that proportionate? It is not, right? And countries like Sri Lanka are a great example, because in Sri Lanka, defamation is decriminalized. In Pakistan, there are over 2 to 3 different criminal laws for defamation. So if someone says something about you, you can put them in jail.
Yes.
And I think that is a very disproportionate legal regime. Similarly, when we talk about necessity and legality, that's also under question, because your laws need to be rooted in the Constitution, and they're not legally justified if you're violating fundamental rights. And they're not really necessary. It's not necessary to put someone in jail for simply putting out a tweet or a Facebook post or an Instagram story. But you can go to jail for just posting those things in Pakistan. And I think that is something that we're, really trying to campaign to stop.
It is very extreme. Honestly, it is. It is. Going to jail for posting something, 3 years with 2 million rupee fine, which is also a substantial amount of money
Exactly.
in Pakistan. When we talk about the constitution, and when you say that the term proportionate, these are very subjective terms. What does it mean to you? So, maybe this is what it meant for the government or for the person who passed that law. But what does that term proportionate mean to you? How can you tell what?
See, proportionality is simply that the punishment that you get is proportionate to the crime you have committed. I take exception to things even being called a crime. Should not be a crime to criticize the government. It should not be a crime to share something that you thought was true, right? But it is. And then you're putting a huge punishment for it. So, of course, you're going to jail and you're being put in with murderers because you put out a post. Would any reasonable person think that's proportionate? No. But the state seems to think so. But maybe the state wants disproportionate punishment.
Probably.
right?
Yeah.
Because they want people to be silent and they don't want people to be speaking up and criticizing them. And I think therein lies the problem. But of course, these legal tests are to be interpreted by legal minds with training in jurisprudence and law, so which are our judges. So clearly, the courts of law have to be making these distinctions. But at the end of the day, those who are making the law have to really be following, what the Constitution says. And again, it's very important to emphasize that that is being violated. And we're also seeing this, shift to the right wing the world over, where we're seeing majoritarian fascist governments getting elected in the region and beyond. Sri Lanka's lucky, there's a socialist, there's a progressive government in place, and that's why I'm always so excited to come here, because it gives me hope that just around in our neighborhood there are countries who are getting things right, and that's why we hope that the Online Safety Act hopefully will also be amended by this government to make it more rights friendly, because of course the previous government passed it in a very haphazard manner and there are a lot of issues with it. But I'm very happy that the new government, when they were campaigning in the election, they said we're going to change this law, and we're looking forward to having an example in the region, Sri Lanka being a leader of good legislation that governs the internet space in a way that respects human rights rather than violates it.
Thank you. And I think, we had our downfalls, and groups like Factum and also other small groups, like you said. Now they're trying. Now we're trying to be better. We're trying to create better policies to understand. And I think that is what you're doing in Pakistan as well, is to first understand the people.
Exactly.
Right? And because it all starts with the people. So when you pass on a law, it'll be very difficult to satisfy the entire population. So what has to be satisfied? We talk about culture, right? How would you, in a country where you have different sects of people, different religions or different castes in some countries, different races in other countries, how can you unify culture? And even when we're talking at this epic global level, I hear more often that the global south needs to be one voice against these tech platforms, because then we're larger than them in that sense. We have the mass. So they have to listen, I think one of a lady said on the stage. So how would you unify this culture? Let's start from inside Pakistan. How can you unify a culture when there's so many divisions?
See, you don't need to unify cultures. There's beauty in diversity and there's strength in diversity. So every culture can coexist with others. It is your rights that are based in principles, right? The principle is don't murder, right? Don't incite violence against others, right? Don't say anything that puts another person's life in danger. Don't bring down people based on their identity, right? So these principles are universal and they apply across the board, and these are also principles that most decent human beings believe in, right? And I think that's the framework we need to really think of, that what principles should we have in place that will satisfy people's needs but also preserve their dignity. And at the core of all human rights is the concept of human dignity, right? Because your rights are protecting your basic dignity, and there are actors out there that try to violate it, right? And I think that's what we have to center it around. And of course, governments at the end of the day run on money of the people paid through taxes.
Exactly.
And they come into government through votes of the people. So they have to be answerable and accountable to them, rather than protecting interests of what they think is security, of what they think is necessary, of like different interest groups, right? And I think that's what the main challenge is. So it has to be rooted in what the people's needs are. And that the people are the best judge of it. So if you are putting out laws that say people cannot speak out against the government, then that is very, very deeply problematic. And I think most people agree that they should not be in place. So we're seeing that governments are becoming less and less representative of the people's voices. And that's why we're seeing people getting disenchanted with governments and democratic processes and elections also. But that's a signal. We saw what happened in Sri Lanka a few years back. We've seen what happened in Bangladesh just last year. People will not tolerate, governments that are disconnected from the public, and then through the ballot, they will vote for governments and political parties that are more receptive to the feelings of the people. And that's the beauty of democracy, because the system cleans out the bad actors and brings out the better actors in the minds of the people.
Definitely. And like you rightly said, it's by the people, for the people. So if the government says you cannot speak against the government, we will fine you, we will put you in jail, that is not right. In fact, that is not by the
Exactly.
people, for the people.
Exactly.
If you elected someone, you should completely have the right to speak against them when they don't do what you expected of them,
Absolutely.
right? You are giving them the power, in fact. So what is the kind of regulation that you believe in? Do you believe in a co-state regulation? Or
So for me, I think I'm wary of state regulation, because the state will always protect its own interest, right? And especially the way states are designed in a post-colonial world, a lot of it is just colonial strategies being implemented by people who are indigenous. So that's why I'm wary of the state stepping in to regulating the internet. Of course, you need to be looking at, whether laws are being followed by people, and laws already exist. But bringing in special regulations then opens room for abuse, right? Because then what governments start doing is they start targeting political opponents and political opposition. They start targeting, dissidents and critics, and they start, putting in check the media in a bad way, where they start filing cases against journalists or threatening them,
they
right?
use it for their own interest?
They use them for their own interests. So that's why I think I'm wary of the government regulating too much. I do believe in co-regulation, where the industry comes up with their own codes. You have community standards, you have terms of services, but then the companies have to do better in implementing them. They have to be equitable. They have to look at different languages that exist and are used on their platforms, and they have to, put their money where their principles are, in protecting users who are using the internet. But I'm very wary of the government playing that role, and I'm also wary of companies playing too much of a role when it comes to that, right? So that's why community-based solutions such as community notes that X has and Meta is also starting to introduce them are better models, because the community is then reporting them. And even community standards, anyone can report content on social media to the companies. But the companies have to be better responsive to those signals that users are sending them. Because when companies are not responsive, then governments step in with bad laws.
That is interesting. I tend to agree with you. And I think you strongly believe in the inherent goodness that you have in people. Because if you take a community, there's always a percentage of people or groups of people who are the bad actors in this community, right? They're the ones that are causing the harm and putting information integrity at risk. So when you say it needs to be governed by the community, so you're betting on the people. You're saying that I believe in the goodness of people, and I believe that as a mass, as a big population, the majority of this community wants good for others. So we can do this ourselves, and we do not need the government's intervention. We don't need the government to put laws. We can do it with the help of the companies, of course, that are the responsible.
Exactly. And not only do people want good for others, maybe they don't, but they want good for themselves, right? And because they want good for themselves, they will go and say, okay, if someone's saying something about me, there is a mechanism for me to fact check them or counter that information, right? So it doesn't even have to be out of the goodness of the heart. It's self-preservation, and that's what human beings operate on. But of course, yeah, there's experts and stuff, and of course, the fact checking that you do of other posts online or on reporting content online is based on a framework that the companies have in place, right? So if you're putting a note to fact check someone, you have to put a source and a reference underneath. It just can't be anything that you decide to make up. So within that framework, I think moderating content is way more effective, but the companies, of course, have to be responsive in that mechanism.
Definitely. Usama, to the people who are not the experts in the industry, right? In your own personal view, in your own personal knowledge, what would be the do nothing scenario? If we do nothing today, what do you think is going to happen to the world in the next 5, 10, 15 years? What do you see coming to us if we don't act on this now?
A lot of social division, a lot of social divisions based on identities, and misunderstandings between people. And I think that's what we need to preserve. So people have understanding, people have respect for each other, and people are, talking to each other in a civil manner. I think debate and discussion and conversations, even if they're uncomfortable, are very, very important, rather than stopping people from having those debates, discussions, and conversations.
I agree completely with you. What do you hope to take back to Pakistan from this summit?
Sri Lankan tea and cinnamon.
Yes.
But also, I think the networks, and especially I'm very excited about the global majority that's represented here, the global south. So connecting with people from across continents and looking at best practices. So how are people tackling issues, and what solutions can we come up with collectively, and then use our collective power to get governments and companies to do what's in the interest of people.